Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone, based on your time zone. Welcome in Salesforce Apex Hour. Today, we are going to talk about OmniStudio development tool. My name is Amit Chaudhary. I'm your host and founder of the Apex Hour. We have a special trainer from the Velocity team today, and let me hand over to him for his introduction and for the presentation. Hand over to you.
Thank you, Amit. So thanks a lot for giving me the opportunity to share this session with all of you. And well, let me introduce myself in a couple of words. My name is Gabriel Ostolaza. I'm based in Madrid, Spain, even though now I am in the north of Spain in holidays. I have been working with Velocity and therefore Salesforce when they acquired us for the last 2.5 years. And I am technical instructor. So I teach classes in all industries. Today, after the forward-looking statement where we are forced to say that the slides and discussions are for training purposes only and make purchase decisions based on current functionality and not comments that I can make during this presentation, right? This is the standard forward-looking statement. I have prepared an agenda divided in 3 pieces. The first is a Flexcard, but I'm not going to cover everything that relates to Flexcards because that will be a lot of time. I am going to focus on data sources and parameters passed. And because from the Flexcard, we are going to launch Omniscripts, right? We're going to talk about actions a little bit and best practices for those actions. Then we will move in a second part in this presentation that is going to talk about components of an OmniStudio OmniScript. But again, we are not going to focus on everything related to an OmniScript. We're going to focus on actions that are going to either retrieve data to display in the OmniScript or save data during the OmniScript interaction, okay, collected during the interaction. So we're going to talk about OmniScript actions, the properties of those actions, and use some troubleshooting with the Action Debugger. The last bit is going to talk about data tools. So both the data source of a Flexcard or some of those actions in the OmniScript are data tools. They could be integration procedures or data raptors. They could be also something else, but we're going to focus on those 2 because those are the ones provided by Velocity. And inside the integration procedures and data raptors, we're going to focus in some advantages or some features like relationship queries, multi-nodes, formulas, data format change, link mapping, Upsert and required for Upsert options, etc. So let's start with the first model. Define the requirements, getting data in, navigating data, and setting the actions and the look and feel. This is what we need to do in order to prepare or to start preparing a Flexcard, right? Now, the first thing is to define the requirements. We need to invest time in defining good requirements, thinking always from the perspective of the user that is going to see that this Flexcard, okay, and thinking about the scalability, okay, and efficiency to deliver a better service, because this Flexcard is going to be included maybe into a bigger console, right? So it needs to be effective. And we are going to plan and model for scaling. And we are going, of course, to support a new user. So we're going to think of, okay, an experienced user will know how to find the information, but what about a new user? What about somebody who is new to the company? So that's normally what you need to have in mind. One of the first things that you need to take into consideration when you define a Flexcard is the data source. What data is going to be displayed in this Flexcard? Where is the data coming from? Is it Salesforce? Is it coming from an external API? How many records? Is it just like 4 or 5 fields, or am I going to need a lot of records that are, you know, into an array? How often is it accessed? I am going to access it, you know, once a day, or is it going to be accessed thousands of times per hour, right? What processing is required? Does it require a lot of processing, a lot of manipulation of the data, or is the data straightforward, extracted from Salesforce? Is it simple? Or is it complex and it needs, some preparation? Now, often the simplest solution is the best solution. Don't try to overwhelm in order to use all the features that exist. We also need to take into consideration what parameters do I need to send to this data source. Do I need to send, for example, the account ID? Do I need to send my postal code? Do I need to send my SLA, serial number? What information is needed, okay, for this data source to do the job? And last but not least, the functionality and performance, right, which is number one. Here on the right, you have all the list of available data sources, and there's no one that is better than other for all cases. Otherwise, we will only have one, right? Each of them is required for a different case. However, we recommend to use, if the data source is kind of complex and we need to prepare data, we recommend the integration procedure, and we will explain why. We're going to see some of them in the next few slides. So first of all, the integration procedure is server-side processing. It can chain together, multiple process steps. So it's easy to create because it is a declarative tool. It is easy to troubleshoot, right? Because you can troubleshoot step by step. You can drag and drop those steps. You can call other services. So if you have already prepared an Apex class, you can call it from this integration procedure. It can run synchronously or asynchronously. You can say fire and forget, right? And it will launch at the beginning of the OmniScript, but the OmniScript can proceed. The OmniScript is a guided process. We will see that later on. It supports also batch processing, okay, for large amounts of data, and that can help to overcome some governor limitations. You can use conditional logic in the sense of, imagine that you have 3 different use cases and you need a data raptor load for each of those cases. So you can put a condition saying, if the user has selected this radio button, then launch the first data raptor. If the second, then launch the second. If the third, then launch the third. So that's fantastic, okay, to be able to do conditional logic inside the integration procedure. It does error handling. It can call any API, okay. It can call also a REST client, so any external API integration. You can do a step-by-step simulation, and you're going to have not only the JSON that is going to be returned in the case that your integration procedure is returning JSON, but also what is the input and what is the output for every single of those steps, right? And of course, we do have versioning and activation. Only one integration procedure can be active at a time, but you can have several versions and you can improve and you can keep a kind of backup of your work. The next tool that we are going to mention is Data Raptor. The Data Raptor can be a data source on its own or can be part of an integration procedure, right? Again, no coding is required, declarative completely, read or write, depending on what you want. In that particular case, as a data source of a Flexcard, it will be only for reading, right? It will not be writing anything. It can transform XML to JSON in a transform one, click-based configuration. It runs synchronously. If you want it to run asynchronously, you will need to put it into an integration procedure, and it runs on the client, right? So if you want the data raptor to run on the server, then you will need to put it again inside an integration procedure. And it can be accessed from any external REST client, because at the end of the day, a data raptor gets saved as a class, an Apex class, okay? And it has a very good built-in simulation that is going to tell you not only the result, but also the SQL query that was executed. And then you have all the API calls, direct SQL, SOSL, REST, APIs, streaming channels, Apex REST, remote, And this last one is funny. Custom JSON is just if you want to test the result of a Flexcard, or if you are doing the design, but you don't have the data yet, you can copy and paste a static JSON, and that is going to feed, okay, your Flexcard. Once your Flexcard has been designed, you will need to create your data source to map exactly the data that you have copy and paste in this custom JSON. So that's good for simulating or creating when you don't Flexcard when you don't have a data source already there. Now, the actions on the Flexcard can normally appear after the fields. Normally, a Flexcard, is to define information about something. For example, in that case, for policies. This is my marine policy, okay, for my boat. And I need a couple of fields, and I need a bunch of actions. Now, each of those actions can launch another page, a Visual Force page, an OmniScript. It can launch almost anything that can be represented by a URL. Also, it can pop up, okay, another Flexcard, and we will see that later on. Okay, so we have lots of possibilities with those actions, and we are going to see that later on. They launch in context. What does it mean that they launch in context? If you launch that from the console of an account, you can pass the account ID parameter to the underlying element. So to the child card or the flyout. Flyout is the name of this, the pop-up window that will show additional fields or additional actions. So there's two basic ways of launching a URL, okay, from a Flexcard. One is through what we call an an OmniScript action. Through an OmniScript, you can only launch an OmniScript, and you will need to define in the OmniScript action all the parameters. So the type, the subtype, the icon, the label, everything. However, there is a possibility, number two, of creating a velocity action or OmniStudio action. Now everything that has the name velocity has become OmniStudio. And this OmniStudio action has the advantage of being created once, but then you can execute it from this Flexcard, or you can execute it from any other Flexcard. So when you have an N-to-1, okay, let's say Flexcards that can execute the same OmniScript, then you will choose this second path of creating a OmniStudio action. We'll see that in the next slide more clearly. So configure an OmniScript action when you want a one-to-one relationship. One Flexcard calls one OmniScript. And this allows changing you the theme, the icon, the name. But every time you create an state, for example, we will talk about the states in a bit, you will need to create this action, right? You can also clone the existing state, and if the action is there, the action will be copied across. The second one, a velocity or OmniStudio action, is configured only once, and it's a reusable component. So you configure the label, the icon, the name, and most of the parameters in the OmniStudio action. And then from the Flexcard, you just call the name of the action, and all the parameters, boom, are heritated, okay, are absorbed. So again, if you go for the option of a OmniStudio action from any of those elements, from a record page, Visual Force page, from a Flexcard, from an external API, you can call this action. And this action on its turn can call anything that can be represented by a URL. So an OmniScript can be executed, can be converted into a URL, and clicking on this URL, it will execute the OmniScript, but also you can execute a record or Visual Force page or a document or a community page or whatever can be represented in a URL format. And you can pass parameters through this OmniStudio action. Now, I've mentioned before the word states. What is a state? A state is, let's say, a visualization of that flex card depending on the context, right? So in that case, we have, is this person a delinquent? If yes, because he owes money, okay, to the company, I'm gonna set how much money is due, right? And then the last payment. And I'm going to provide a cancel, and I'm gonna provide a collections actions, right? However, if the person is not a delinquent, but it has a past due, so it owes money still, but not that much money. It hasn't passed the threshold. So I want to show a different set of fields, like the due, last payment, and maybe a different set of actions, and maybe different colors, right? Because it's not as dramatic as the first case. So instead of having to create one flex card for each of those cases, and then maybe one console for each of those cases, what I can do is create states in the same flex card. And then at the end of the states, normally I have a default state. And this default state normally has no condition, right? It is very important that you understand that the states do not have priorities. So the system will always start reading the states from the top to the bottom, and then the first state that meets the requirements, it will fire, right? And only one state per card can be displayed. As long as one state meets the requirements or has the criteria to true, then that will be the state that will be displayed. Okay, good. So let's do a short demo on Flexcards. Let me bring my, can you see my screen? I hope so.
Yep, we can.
Cool. So let's go and create, right, a flex card. So I'm going to click on OmniStudio app, right? And then I'm going to click on the OmniStudio flex card. This OmniStudio app has been created for training, but you can get to the OmniStudio flex cards, okay, from the app launcher. And from here, I'm going to create new. When you create a new flex card, the first thing you need to do is to give it a name. So I'm going to give master account, test master account. The title is going to be the unique. Okay, this same name already exists. So I'm going to call it Gabo, whatever. Yep. And I'm going to define if it is a child card, if you want this card to be, this flex card to be appended or amended to another card, right? That's not the case. Now, the next thing when you create a new flex card is to select the data source. And this is one of the most important decisions, because that's the data that is going to be displayed to the user. Okay, then in the flex card, you need to design the look and feel, right? The styling, but you need to extract the data from somewhere. So I'm going to select an integration procedure. Yeah. And in that integration procedure, I am going to provide a sample get master account details, right? Now, within an integration procedure, that's probably not enough unless your card is not linked to a context. If your card is linked to a context, for example, an account, then you need to add a parameter, this input map, and you can add as many parameters as you wish, right? What I'm going to do is in the input map, I am going to put account ID. Oh, sorry, account ID. And this is very important. This name need to match the filter value of your data Raptor. If you do have a data Raptor, and if the filter says extract fields from the account where the account ID is equals to account ID, this account ID needs to match with what you enter here with this string. And then the value, if you want to pass the default record ID that is sent to this flex card from the console that is executing it, you will put record, capital I, and then D. and you will use squiggly brackets. Sorry, I did a wrong bracket over here, right? Now, once you have this integration procedure, and once you have this input map, sometimes this next button becomes gray. So as you have seen, just clicking on there and selecting again the integration procedure and clicking somewhere else, it becomes blue and you can proceed. And now I can do a fetch over here. Oh, sorry, I need to put a value on this record ID, okay, in order to extract data from a real account. So I'm going to extract, I already have prepared another tab with my Acme account. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to enter this, fetch, and you have the results. Now the results are table. If it is an array, okay, it will display here. Because it's not, I need to click on the tab called JSON. And now I have, as a result of executing this data source, I have a contact node, JSON node, with an array, and I have an account node. If I want to use only the data inside the account node, what I can do is to do a filter. So in this result JSON path, I clicking on it, automatically it detects the root nodes of this data source, and it has detected contact and it has detected account. So I'm going to click on account, and immediately on this JSON blob below here, it's doing a filtering. Okay, so now when I click save, it's going to create a template, Flexcard, with the fields. Let's look at here on the right, and let's open those fields. You see, account ID, account name, account phone, account postal code, account primary contact name, and account website are the fields that have been extracted by the data source. Now I need to start building my card, dragging and dropping actions into this canvas, right? But that's not the aim of the presentation. So let's, I can show you also, let's go to an existing created card. This is the created card, okay, for this team master account. I'm just going to focus on this menu over here. And if you go to the right, you see that there is edit account and there is change contact. Those two are the two actions included in this drop-down menu. The menu is a component, okay, that you can drag and drop into one of your cards, and this menu helps you to collapse a list of actions. And in that case, we have two actions. One is called edit account, and if I click on the pencil, you will see that this edit account is an OmniScript action type. So this is the one-to-one. If it is an OmniScript, you need to define the label, you need to define the icon, you need to define the OmniScript by defining the type, subtype, and the language, layout type, and the context ID, or the parameter that is going to be passed to this OmniScript, okay, to execute. You need to specify the OmniScript is going to open in a new target, new tab or not, and so on. So all of those parameters are not needed. If I click on the second one, change contact, and I click edit, this is not an OmniScript action. This is a velocity action. And this is why we are still allowed to talk about velocity, because in the code, it is still there. It hasn't been changed to OmniStudio action. In the next release, probably it will. Okay, so if you define velocity action, the only thing you need to provide is the name. And as soon as you provide the action name, all the rest of the parameters will be brought from the action. Okay, good. So let's go back to my presentation. Any questions so far? If there are some questions, let me see the chat. If there is there a list of values somewhere, like record ID? That's a very, very good question, Sean. Okay. I haven't found a list of all the existing like values that you can can use. However, the good news is that in the next version of code, you are going to have something very similar to the Action Debugger that we have in the Omniscripts, but for the Flexcards. And then within this Action Debugger, you are going to see all the parameters that you can, send, and all the information that is being sent and that is being retrieved, okay, by all the actions in the Flexcard. For troubleshooting, this feature, it's going to be fantastic. I think it's going to appear in 234, okay, 232, 234, okay, release. Yep. Okay, that's another good question. Integration procedure, how are they authenticated? Yeah, in the integrate, if you want some security, yes, you need to use integration procedures. Or if you want, for example, field level security only, then you can use a Data Raptor. And I will talk about this field level security in the Data Raptor later on. Okay. So let me continue, and I will go back to the questions later on if we have time, because we have a lot to cover. OmniStudio OmniScripts, complete guided business interactions on any platform. An OmniScript is a guided process. You're guiding a user, and it's normally going to display information, it's going to collect information, and it's going to save this information, probably in an existing record, or it might create new records. Okay. Now, it's completely declaratively. You have an OmniScript designer, and you normally have the actions. Let me go back because I didn't have my pen activated. So you have actions, you have display actions, you have functions, groups, and inputs. And from here, you can do a search by the name of the component that you want to add, and then you can add. You can add a step. You can add an integration procedure. Here, there is another integration procedure. Normally, one integration procedure is used to get data. Another one is used to save data. And then the last is an action called navigate action. We normally use in the canvas, what you see is what you get. In other words, if you click on this arrow, it will display all the fields that are going to show in the step, right? It will be something equivalent to the preview. If you want to preview not in the step, but in a complete screen, then you will click on this preview, and then this will convert, this button will be converted to design. And then clicking on design, you come back, okay, to configure the elements or the components and the properties. Yeah. And all of those are really Lightning Web components. And the best thing about this declarative tool is that when you click on the activate version here button, it's going to combine all the Lightning Web components, all the individual Lightning Web components into one Lightning Web component. And it's going to do that behind the scenes. You don't need to modify any field. You don't need to do any changes on individual files. Okay, it's going to do everything for you, and it's going to create your OmniScript that you can afterwards export and use if you want. Okay. So to launch an OmniScript, you can launch it from many places. You can launch it from a Flexcard, as we have seen in the previous section. You have OmniStudio Actions on Visualforce, or external websites, via mobile apps, embed or launch, with URL in frame. There is lots and lots of options of executing. This is also an embedded, tool out of the box that Velocity has prepared, and you can use it to search, the actions that are the Velocity actions that are for your particular record type. And that's quite interesting. It's called the Power Launcher, right? And it's available out of the box. Now, to launch an OmniScript, you can launch an OmniScript in context. And then what we mean by in context is from an account console. right? So you're going to make something related to an account or related to an insurance or related to a contact, right? So you're going to pass a parameter, and this OmniScript is going to use this parameter to retrieve information or to update information on that record. Or it could be with no context. And no context means from a public location, maybe you want to subscribe to a new service, right? But you are not a customer already. So this no context might need to create an account, a contact, and then either a policy or a subscription or whatever type of thing you are selling, okay? A product, a service, whatever. So normally an OmniScript contains steps, and we normally say divide and you will conquer. So don't overcrowd, okay, steps with lots of information. Make them clear, make them simple, give instructions, and make them easy to read and to act, okay, by the user. So break into logical steps, and the considerations are from the user perspective, and if possible, from a beginner user, not from a trained user. That's the advantage of these OmniScripts. Augment before, after, and between with other components. Okay, so we start with the basic skeleton, and then we enrich it and guide the user with text, with help, with graphics. So the UX, okay, user experience, it's fundamental here. And the steps can be conditions on data. So that's very important as well. If somebody clicks in a button saying, I do not have a police report for my incident, you're not gonna click next and find out that you're requesting a lot of data from the police report, because he has previously said, I haven't filled a police report yet. So you can skip this step, or you can skip a block, or you can skip a field. So most of the components can be conditionally shown, right? That's cool. And then you have lots of input elements. I'm not going to focus on those input elements because you know, there are many, and well, probably you are all aware of them. Okay, but you have text, dates, date and time, number, currency, range, password, telephone, radio, checkbox, disclosure. Some of them, they are multiple select. Some of them are single select. Some of them, they can display a text or an icon or a picture, right? So they are really, really flexible in terms of user experience, right? But what I'm going to focus on is the data source. And the data source basically can be very similar to the data sources of the Flexcard. However, in an OmniScript, you don't have a single data source. In an OmniScript, you have a sequence of actions like data action 1. Normally, this is the get integration procedure. I'm going to think about an integration procedure because this is the best practice, the recommended one, right? Then you have a first step. So this integration procedure is going to provide the field information for this step, right? Now, maybe depending on what you collect in this step, you're going to execute a second data action. And this data action can maybe retrieve information from an external API, right? Then you will move into step number 2, and you might have a data action 3. Notice the difference between this data action that is outside the step and this data action that is inside the step. Now, when you put a data action inside a step, this is perfectly valid. However, it's going to appear as a button, and it will only execute if you click, if the user clicks in that button. So examples of that is, imagine that you want to send an email with a quotation attached, right? So you can have an email action inside a step, and you can tell your user, if you click on this button, an email will be sent to the user, to the customer, with a quote attached, okay? And then the last data action, it's normally reserved for saving information. It could be a save integration procedure, or it could be a save data raptor, or it could be a load data raptor, or whatever else, right? If it is, if you need to save inside and outside Salesforce, it is recommended to use an integration procedure because this is the most flexible one, okay? Now, also to control the experience, you have steps. inside the steps is like an HTML page. Inside the step, you have blocks. So you can make blocks conditional as well, and you can show one block or another depending on a selection that was done by the user. Inside the block, you have inputs. Inside a block, you can, for example, have a type ahead block. And we are going to see probably an example of that in one of our OmniScripts. And then you can have inputs that are outside the block, but inside the step. Now, there are some rules, like the input can never, ever go outside a step, because an input is either to display or to collect something, right? So it cannot be outside the HTML page. The only thing that can be outside an HTML page are actions, like integration procedures or data raptors or calculation procedures or calculation matrices that are happening behind scenes, right? You can also have an edit block, and in this edit block, you're going to have actions, and they will be executed inside that block, and you can define properties inside this block. Now, controlling the experience with reusable OmniScripts. If you have OmniScripts that are going to be reused, like, for example, collect information of a credit card, or maybe creating a ticket, a service request, okay, or a case. So those type of OmniScripts, they are going to be reused across many different other OmniScripts. So in order to save time, you can create an OmniScript, make it reusable, and then you can call it from any other OmniScript. Now, just one limitation: one reusable OmniScript cannot call another reusable OmniScript to avoid loops, right? So there's only one level deep about that. And functions, you have text blocks, you have set errors, you have messages. So basically, text blocks are very, very rich. You can add tables, you can add text, you can add images inside it, and you can format it, you know, as a rich text editor. So that's really, really very powerful. Then you have the set errors. Set errors basically is like a formula, and then this formula, it's going to verify if the user has entered certain combination of inputs. If certain combination of inputs were entered, then you're going to allow the user to proceed. If not, you might display an error in a particular field saying you must check this field or do enter something in this field before you can proceed, right? And then a message, it could be, for example, a warning or a notification that you can provide if a condition is met, a failure condition, right? Then you have user feedback. You can have a data Raptor transfer or building data. Okay, so as I have said, you can send emails. You can have a PDF action to create a PDF, for example, for a quote. You can use a DocuSign envelope or signed actions, right? So you can integrate that with DocuSign. And building data, you can include inside those OmniScripts calculation matrices, calculation procedures, aggregations, formulas, set values. Set values is very, very powerful because you can add formulas inside these set values, but you can also set fixed static values, okay, to start with the execution of the OmniScript. For example, when you're testing, this set values is a big friend. Okay? We'll see an example of that as well if we have time. And normally we close an OmniScript by a navigate action. The navigate action is the equivalent of the done action in the previous version, okay, with Angular. And navigate action basically tells the system where to drive the user after the execution of this OmniScript. Normally it drives the user to the console where the original button to execute the OmniScript was located, but you can send them to a record page, to a URL, or to anywhere else. Okay. You also have the button save for later that you can customize. However, the save for later is going to give you a unique URL, and you need to keep track of the URL in order to continue executing this OmniScript later on. Okay, and then you have, of course, cancel options, and you can tailor the messages that you provide in all those buttons. Good. So let's go for the next demo. let me. And for that demo, I'm going to bring back my OmniScript, and I'm going to go to my team update account primary contact, right? Now, I'm going to click on design because I am doing a test. And in that OmniScript, if you look at this, let me close the step first. If you look at this canvas, first of all, we have two integration procedures. The first one is called IP get account primary contact details. The second one is called integration procedure get weather forecast. Inside this OmniScript, I want to show information from an account and information from the weather inside the location of this account, okay, or in the location of that account. Then I have a step, and inside this step, I'm going to show lots of things. I'm going to provide a message alert for the weather. I'm going to provide a text block, okay, with a table of 2 rows, 2 columns. And I'm going to provide icons. I'm going to provide text. I'm going to provide merge variables. Then I'm going to have a radio button. I'm going to give the user the possibility to choose, okay, do you want to update the primary contact of the account or change it or create a new one and then make him or her, you know, primary contact. And then you have blocks. Now, I have decided to create only one step for simplicity. I don't want the user to click next and previous, right? However, I don't want the 3 blocks of those 3 actions that are mutually exclusive to appear. So what I do is with this little I, this is a condition. So this block will only appear if the radio primary contact, which is this element, has been selected to update. So the first option. This second block will only appear if it is change, and the third block will only appear if it is create, right? So by doing that, it seems that my step is going to be very long and it's going to have lots of fields, but it's not true because 2/3 of the step are going to be hidden. Right? Then we have a set values where I'm going to create a formula, and then I'm using the set errors conditional again to this formula. And in this formula, I'm going to make sure that the user will not finalize the OmniScript without having set a primary contact. So if no primary contact was set up in the account, the user doesn't change and the user doesn't create, then give a warning and don't allow the user to click next, right? This is what this set errors is doing here. And then once I have finished, okay, the last thing is to save with another integration procedure and to navigate, okay? Now, what I'm going to show you is in those elements, because we said that in this session, we were going to focus on how to pass parameters between elements. So in this action, integration procedure get account primary contact details, we need to send parameter values to the integration procedure that the action is calling. How do we do that? If you look on the right at the properties and you click on remote properties and you scroll down, you see that there is absolutely nothing here in remote properties, right? However, if I click on send response transformations, under send response transformations, I have send JSON path and send JSON node. Send JSON path is basically a filter of the JSON blob of this OmniScript, and it's going to collect, it's going to take the node called context ID. And it's going to put the value of this node, context ID, inside a new node called account ID. So as a result, I am passing account ID equals, and then the value of the context ID. Correct? This is the only parameter that is needed on the first integration procedure. Now, the second integration procedure get weather forecast, if I look at the first remote properties, in the remote properties, I have checked add extra payload twice. So there are two extra payload parameters that are going to be sent. And those extra payload parameters, this is another way of doing exactly the same thing that I did with the previous integration procedure. But it's just another way. I am now sending the account ID equals, and I put percentage, context ID percentage. This is the nomenclature for merge variables, okay, in OmniScript syntax. And I'm going to send the number of days. The second integration procedure needs the account ID. Why? Because within this account ID, I'm going to extract the postal code, and with the days, I'm going to get the forecast weather for the next 2 days, right? And I'm going to click this small box here, send only extra payload. By doing that, I'm avoiding that this integration procedure receives the entire JSON blob. Because if you don't check this small checkbox, it will receive everything, absolutely everything. Right? This is quite important, even though it will work because you are sending those two parameters that are needed on top of a bunch of information. If you execute a lot of OmniScripts in the same minute or at the same second, okay, that might affect the performance, right? So those are the things that I wanted to show. The last thing I wanted to show is the preview and how to use the Action Debugger for troubleshooting. So I'm going to clear the logs. Yep. And you see that when I click on this button, I didn't have to click because the first time you click preview, it automatically launched. And I was lucky. And because I was testing earlier on, I do have already entered the context ID. But this context ID is the account ID, right? And you need it for testing purposes. So I see the results directly on my page on the preview. But here on the right, if you click, if you don't have it open, you have an icon over here where you can open the debugger, Action Debugger, and you have two things. The data JSON, and data JSON is showing you the JSON blob that goes within the OmniScript. And this is actualized or refreshed on real time. So if I take actions over here, okay, the JSON blob over here will be modified, okay, automatically. Okay, so the Action Debugger, let me go and do the OmniScript, and then we will take a look at the Action Debugger. So I'm going to change the primary contact. If you take a look here, the primary contact is Lian Tomlin. So I'm going to change the primary contact, and this is what we call a type ahead block. The type ahead block, if I enter a letter E, is going to check how many contacts belonging to Acme, to the account Acme, are in the list of existing contacts. And it's going to show me every one of them. Okay, so Lian Tomlin was the primary contact. I'm going to choose now Edward Stamos. Okay, another person. And I'm going to click next. You see that because I choose the middle box, okay, the fields automatically changed. Why? Because I have conditional blocks, right? And now that I have saved, I go to my Action Debugger. And beautifully, okay, you have the IP get account primary contact details, IP get weather forecast, but also I have a Data Raptor change contact TA type ahead, where I can check what was the parameter sent, remote data, request data. Those are where the parameters send, account ID, and the lookup key, the E. And then within this request, the response was an array. We don't see it very well because I need to make my screen a little, oops. But if you take a look here, you have an array, okay? And the array has Edward Stamos, okay? Then Lian Tomlin, then Howard Jones, and then Jeff Hunt. And for every one of them, you have the change contact name key, so the name, change contact ID, so the record ID of the contact, and the email address. Okay, those are the three things that you have for every one of those members. And if you go to the last one, IP safe primary contact details, exactly the same thing. Because it is an integration procedure, I am not so much interested on the remote class and remote method. Why? Because those are going to be static, okay? Calling that or the integration procedure. The integration procedure behind the scenes is nothing else than a class and a method, right? And I'm not so much interested on the remote options neither, right? What I'm interested in is in the request data and the response. In that particular case, because it is a safe integration procedure, I couldn't care less about the response. What I'm really interested is in the request. So am I sending what is needed? And what is needed is if I want to change, okay, I need at least the account ID, because I need the account ID where I want to change the primary contact. And another thing I need is the change contact ID. So I need the record ID of the user that is now going to become primary contact. So those two fields are very important, okay, in this integration procedure safe, right? Just one last thing, coming back to the design. If I go now to my IP safe contact, and if I look at the sense response transformation, look at this send JSON path. Now, from all the JSON blob that we have seen, it's going to filter and it's only going to send, okay, step contacts, the node called step contacts. But because you leave the send JSON node empty, it's going to hold all the content of a step contacts inside this step contacts node. The difference, if you use this IP action or any other action in an integration procedure, is if you use the send JSON path in an integration procedure, the step contacts node will be removed. So when you filter in an OmniScript, in the properties, you filter is only going to send this node, but it's going to keep the node in the root, right? If you do it in an action in an integration procedure, it's going to eliminate the root. Is going to eliminate the path. Why? I don't know, but it's a difference in the behavior, right? Because those same components, those same actions can be used inside an OmniScript or inside an integration procedure, and they have very similar properties. Okay, so keep that in mind as a tip. Well, the tip would be test things, okay, before you you move forward. Okay, let me go back to my presentation. Well, basically, I see there are some questions. Could I override read-only fields? Normally, I guess you can't override read-only fields. What you can do is to use another field instead, right? But normally, read-only fields are read-only. You cannot override them. How send response transformation works? Well, the send response transformation, as I said, this is one of the most tricky things. Send JSON path, right, is a filter of the JSON blob. Send JSON node is name the content of the previous send JSON path as something. Okay, and then response is doing exactly the same thing, but instead of the data that is sent to the remote entity is the data that is coming from the remote entity. We'll see an example of this response JSON path later on in an integration procedure. Okay, so this send JSON path, send JSON node is, you know, really critical to understand how data is transferred between components. Yeah, that's a good question. How is this different from velocity? Is this different from velocity OmniStudio? Send equals incoming data. Well, send in that case is from the OmniScript action, okay, to the integration procedure, because this OmniScript is calling the integration procedure. Response is from the integration procedure to the OmniScript, the response that the integration procedure is giving me. Okay, good. Let's move on to the last bit, which is probably the most interesting, which is data tools. We've been talking about Flexcards and OmniScripts, but both of them, Flexcards and OmniScripts, they require, okay, those data tools to have data fit in. We're going to talk about integration procedures to get, manipulate, or save, and data raptors, extract or turbo extract, which is a case of extract, then load or transform. So this is just a comparison on why using those tools. If you have an easy case for building an Apex code, okay, it can take you 2 hours to build it, to test it, design it, etc. Doing the same with an integration procedure, it might take you 30 minutes. So you're saving 75% of your time. However, if you have a very difficult case, okay, that in Apex will take you about 6 weeks, within an integration procedure, it might take you 1 day. So you're saving 97% of your time, right? So I'm not saying that everything that you do with an integration procedure cannot be done with Apex. Yes, it can be done with Apex, but you're saving a lot of time because it's a declarative tool. It's easy to troubleshoot. It's easy to test, right? So integration procedures, data inputs. Basically, this is to get data. So we can get data with a data raptor extract or a turbo extract. We can get data with an HTTP action. If it is from an external API, it must be with an HTTP action. Or imagine that you spend a long time building up your Apex classes. So we need an Apex class for that. And we can use a remote action inside my integration procedure to call an existing Apex class. You call the class, you call the method, that's it. Okay. And also in some implementations, Velocity is going to give you, or Salesforce Industries is going to provide you a list of existing methods, okay, Apex classes that you can use, and they call them services, right, for your purposes. Now, for saving data, the integration procedure, remember, can be used to get data, but it can also be used to transform and to save data. So in order to save data, you can do a response action, right? A data Raptor post action for calling a data Raptor load. This is a little tricky, the word load and the word post, okay? It's a little misleading, but they are synonyms and they mean the same thing, but the action is called post and the data Raptor is called load. Then you can use a delete action to delete a record, right? Or an HTTP action to send data, not to Salesforce, but to an external API. You can use also an email action, DocuSign envelope, and you cannot use a PDF action. The PDF action is only available within an OmniScript. This is one of the differences. Some people, of course, you don't have anything that is going to be user oriented because the integration procedure is happening behind the scenes, right? It's a parallel processing. It's not towards the user. It doesn't need or require any user interaction. Yeah. So this is an integration procedure designer on the preview. On the left, you will have the parameters. You can input the parameters as key value pairs, or you can click on this button, edit as JSON, and you can enter a JSON blob if it is complex, right? Here in the middle window, you will have the result, but a lot of times the result is not what we expect. So then here is when we go to the debug log, and the debug log, and this is fantastic, okay, has two things. If your integration procedure is long and it has conditional actions, you can click on the execution sequence and you will get a list of all the actions that were executed and in which order. Okay, first of all. Then you can go to every single one of the actions and you will get the name of the action and the name of the action finishing by debug. Now, the name of the action is what I call the output. And the one with debug is going to give you the input. So this is very similar to the action debugger in the OmniScript. In the OmniScript, you had clearly, okay, the request and the response. But here you do have the input, JSON, that you're sending, and you have the output, right? It will be behind this curtain menu, right? It will not be in the middle window, but you have it. And you can filter by every single action, what you are sending to the action and what you are getting back from this action. So for troubleshooting purposes, this debug log, it's gold, right? It's magic. It's wonderful. Then you have the Data Raptor Turbo extract that appeared in one of the latest releases. And this is just more efficient. It's not more feature rich, the other way around. It's very limited, only to one type of object. And you cannot define the name of the variables or the output JSON path. The name is going to be the name of the field, okay, within Salesforce. So it's really limited, right? But performance-wise, it is much better than an extract, a Data Raptor extract. And you cannot use formulas. So it's really, really limited. Something that is really, really important is that you know that this extract output path is going to be used as the root node. So when the turbo extract Data Raptor gives you the JSON, it's not going to give you a flat JSON like the Data Raptor extract. It's going to give you a node called account, and inside this node, as subnodes, is going to give you the name, the phone, and the website. So an easy way to do that is to work with the response JSON path in order to remove this node, this account node, okay? And then you will have a flat list of all your fields, okay? Good. We will talk a little bit about related objects, okay, but later on. Now, Upsert key and require for Upsert. Upsert key is basically what is the key that needs to match in order to save data. Require for Upsert is basically the data that I must have for this record before even I try to update or create the record. I'll give you an example. Imagine that you're going to create a contact, right? The last name, it is a require for Upsert. Why? Because Salesforce require a last name in order to create a record, right? So this is required for Upsert. However, you might want to create last name as Upsert key. So now I have last name as required for Upsert and as an Upsert key. What happens if I have two brothers who have the same last name? That would not be enough, right? You need another Upsert key, then it's going to be the first name. And then by putting the first name and the last name as Upsert keys, I ensure myself not to have duplicates. And this is a certification question, by the way. Okay, so the Upsert key and required for Upsert is an important concept, right? In other cases, for example, for a product, when you are going to create products, you might want to put the product code and the product name as required for Upsert and also as Upsert keys. So you will make sure that you're not going to create duplicates. If you make an update of the price or of any other parameter of for products, right? You need to match the product code and the product name or both in order to make the update. So the way the system works is, first of all, is going to check that all the required for Upsert fields have some information. If not all the required for Upsert fields have this information, skip this record, move to the next. Don't do anything, right? If there is only one record, don't do anything. However, if all of them, all required for Upsert fields have data, then let's go to compare the Upsert keys. If they match, then do an update. If they don't match, then add the new record. Okay, so this is worthy, to review if you have some doubts before attempting the certification exam, if you are planning on doing it. So paste OmniScript JSON and quick match. Now this is quite handy. We can paste the expected input and the expected output. I'm talking about the Data Raptor transform in that case. If we do have the expected input, maybe from a OmniScript debugger. Remember that in the OmniScript debugger, we have a JSON blob, all the JSON DOM, right? That goes together with the OmniScript. So if we can copy from there and paste it here, and we do have by chance my output, in that case, the output, this is a Data Raptor load. So the output is going to be an object in Salesforce. So it's going to create all the fields related to the object account, right? So you don't need any output JSON because this is not a Data Raptor transform. The good news of that is that taking one of those blocks and dragging and dropping over the other, it will create my mappings. And it will cost you probably 5 seconds to do the mappings that otherwise you will need to type, quite a lot. So this quick match, it's really, really interesting. But again, the limitation is that you must have, in that particular case, the expected input. If it is a Data Raptor load, if it is a Data Raptor transform, you need to have the input and the output, okay, in JSON. And then you can do a match of things. Then the options. Remember that we talked before about security. When you use a Data Raptor load, field level security is enforced. In other words, the Data Raptor will launch the SQL command as the user that is executing the OmniScript or that is manipulating the data, okay, that this Data Raptor load is attached to. If you are using a Data Raptor extract, not a Data Raptor load, the field level security is not enforced. So by default, the command is going to be executed as an admin, velocity admin. So if the user does not have the right to read this field, the field will appear anyway, right? So please make sure that you check this field level security. Go to options inside the Data Raptor extract and check this box, check field level security. Okay, and that will enforce. There are other ways of enforcing by profile and by other means. Okay, there's quite a few things about security, but this is a very simple one, and by default it is unchecked. So I just want to warn you. Yeah. Data Raptor designed preview, it's much easier than the integration procedure because you just have to enter the data, right, as a key value pair or as JSON, and you have the results. And here on the right window, on the Debug Log window, you have the SQL command that was executed as a result of this Data Raptor extract in that case. Okay, so it's good for troubleshooting, but it's not as complicated a Data Raptor as it is an integration procedure. Okay. Then relationship queries. So imagine that you have an account. The account has a field, a proprietary field from Velocity called Velocity CMT primary contact ID. And now this is a record ID of a person, of a contact. And now you want to extract the email and the name, not of the account, but of this person, right? So instead of having to do another extraction, another SQL query, what you're going to do is to replace this C by an R. And by replacing this C by an R, the email is not coming from the account, but is coming from the related object, which is in that case, a contact object. This name, similarly, is extracted from the contact, from the primary contact, right? So you don't need to do another SQL extraction, okay? You do it directly because you have a relationship query between this account and the primary contact ID. Okay? So this is quite useful, and it saves some, performance. It improves a little bit the performance. Then we can use lookup filters. In that particular case, we see an example of a lookup filter by contact name. So we are going to look for the contact, but we are not going to extract all the contacts from Salesforce. We are just going to filter contacts from an account ID where the account ID is equal to account ID, right? In my case, I have set the record ID of Acme, and there was Liam Tomlin, Edward Stamos, John House, and so on. And which name, this is the data raptor that I use in the type ahead block, right? Where the name is like, and this is not equal, this includes the lookup key. A lookup key is what I enter E, okay? Is the field that you're going to collect and where the user is gonna type something. So if you find a contact inside this account that contains an E in the first or last name, then give it. Imagine that there is you put an A over here and it's a large account. How many contacts can have an A? Probably all of them between the first name and last name, right? So for that purpose and for limiting, the performance, ensuring you're not killing the performance, you can use a limit, and you can put a limit of 10. So give me 10 results and then stop, the search. Now, when we use a data raptor load now, we can use something we call linking. And this is absolutely great. You can create a contact and then use the record ID provided by Salesforce when we created the contact in order to populate another field. In that case, I'm going to go to the account. Inside the account, I'm going to choose the field velocity INS primary contact ID, and the value is not going to be a static value. It's going to be from the contact, the record ID. The record ID is called ID. So that makes that in a single data raptor load, I am going to create a contact and update the account with that contact that I have just created. Okay, that is fantastic, and that will automatically, the fact of adding this link mapping, if we go now to fields for the mappings in the next slide, you see that this account ID has a second line which has nothing, and then here account velocity INS blah blah blah, and the icon that appears here is a clip. This clip stands for linking or a link mapping, right? So why there is nothing here? Because this is going to come from the contact that is going to be created in the previous step. So when you create this contact with an account ID, with a mail, with a first name, and with a last name, this contact is going to have a record ID. This record ID is going to be populated here, right? So you need to add this line. This line needs to be added. And if you are wondering about this icon over here, this icon stands for Upsert key. Remember I said that for my contact, the first name and the last name needed to be Upsert keys. In my account step, I want that only the update is done if I find, the proper account. So that's why I say account ID equals account ID, and then I put an Upsert key over here. Only do the update of the primary contact if you find this account. Okay. Yeah, the velocity INS and CMT, they are going to be added. They are the API names for the velocity added fields. right? So they are velocity underscore INS when you have an insurance software. They are underscore CMT when you have telco software, telco, energy, or utilities, or media. And you have a PS when it is public sector. Okay, those are the three types of software branches that Salesforce Industries has, or X Velocity, has. Good. They are not for demo, they are a standard, right? Data JSON transformation. So here you will see another explanation of the send JSON path and send JSON node. Well, not send JSON node, but send JSON path. I only want, okay, to send the content of a block inside my step. So what I'm going to do is in my send JSON path, put a step contacts, block create pre-contact. And that is going to make that only the green fields are going to be passed. Now, because I want to pass also the account ID, and the account ID is not included in this node, I need to check additional input, and I'm going to add account ID, and I'm going to give the merge variable code for account ID, right? So this content will come here, and this will be the name of the variable, which is account ID. Okay. Now, if I, for example, wanted a new name here, name colon as a root node, or maybe instead of name, I want output. And then inside the node output, this list, I will put here output. Yeah. And then it will, those three at least, will be inside this node called output. Yeah. So, but keep in mind that this is done in a Data Raptor post-action properties in an integration procedure. That's why when you enter the path is eliminated, and you only have the flat fields, the name of the field with the value. If that was the properties of an OmniScript, you will have the entire path. You will have step contacts, colon, block create, primary contact, colon, and then all the rest of the fields. Okay, cool. JSON subnodes. So in a Data Raptor, you can, in an extract, for example, you can create the output with a structure. And we have seen the usefulness of that when we were building my data source in a Flexcard. Maybe I am only interested on the account node. I am not interested on the contact node. But for ease of creation of less data sources or less data raptors, I am going to create a common data raptor that will extract information about the account and information about the contacts of that account. Okay, so the way to simplify my life is to create in the output JSON path, and this is called path for a reason. A lot of people ask me, Gabo, why they are not called output JSON name? Because it's not a name, because you can provide a path. So by providing this account over here, all those fields will go into the node account, and all those fields will go into the node contact. Sorry, this last one goes into account as well. Okay, so you can define JSON nodes and subnodes directly in the mapping in the output tab. And the advantage of that is that when you are choosing the data source, as we saw earlier on, you can filter and you can say, I want only to display or to collect or to use the data inside the node contact, or only the data inside the node account. We are about to finish the theory, and then we will go to a last demo, and then that will be it. I will open it for questions because I don't have time to answer all the questions. Apologize. So transform weather data. We have an integration procedure that I was planning to show you if time permits, and we are going to save an API key provided by my API vendor, right, as a static value. Yeah, that's why one of the uses of these set values. Then I will use a Data Raptor extract action for within the postal code, right? Within the account ID, extract the postal code. Then I am going to pass the postal code and the API key to the HTTP action. And the HTTP action is going to go to weatherbit.io and make a query, right? Then I will make another query for the forecast data. So on top of that, I'm going to use the days. I will use, of course, the postal code. I will use the API key, but I will use the number of days I want forecast for. Now, maybe between those two HTTP actions, I might get 200 fields. Now, am I going to send my 200 fields unstructured to my Flexcard or to my Omniscript? Maybe not. So what I'm going to do is to send those 200 fields to a Data Raptor transform. My Data Raptor transform is going to give a format of a current node, maybe with 3 fields, and a forecast node with maybe an array of 2 nodes. Apologize because my drawing with the mouse is awful, right? But imagine that this is a forecast node with 1 and 2 nodes. And inside each of those nodes, there are 3 fields on each, right? This is the only thing that I need. I need 3, 6, 9. I don't need 200 fields. I need 9 fields. But I want them, ideally, structured in a current node and in a forecast node. And I am going to achieve that by a Data Raptor transform that on its turn will send that to the response action, and then the response action will provide the answer to the Flexcard. Another advantage of an integration procedure is that this is the client and this is the server. So all the actions executed in a row here, they are executed from the server. There is no client server back and forth negotiation and dialogue, and so that doesn't create additional delays. Yeah. So additional advantages of Data Raptors. The Data Raptors can have concatenation formulas, right? For example, I don't want the city and the state to take 2 fields. I'm going to concatenate them. The icon is going to be provided in 4 characters. I cannot display an icon with 4 characters. Okay, this is just an indicator on the icon in that website. However, I can build up my URL, okay, and use this icon over here as a merge variable, but append an extension and prepend a URL with a path, right, where all the icons reside. Yeah. And the last 2 slides, okay, of this presentation are a kind of diagram that recap the parameters that are passed from the Lightning console until you use them in Salesforce. So the different components, there is a component called record ID. Remember, record lowercase, ID, the I, capital, right? So this record ID is going to be passed as an account ID to my data source. In that case, my data source is an integration procedure. And my integration procedure uses account ID equals account ID, right? Now, be careful. You see here, data source. So this account ID must be equal to this account ID here. But they do not need to match with this one here. This one here, filter value, needs to be equal to this one here, the one in the Data Raptor, right? And in the filter of my Data Raptor extract, I have where the account ID is equals to account ID. And this is the one that will launch the SQL query to Salesforce. Okay, of course, to test it, I need to initiate test parameters. and I need to put as record ID the value of the record ID of an account, of a valid account. Okay, and then of course in this Data Raptor extract map or output tab, I need to do all the mappings to variables or fields that are going to then appear in my Flexcard. Okay, so that's the data source of a Flexcard. If we go to the next, this is a little bit more complex because we have an OmniScript. So we have on the top the extract, I would say here extract, and in the bottom we have the save action, right? So in the extract action, we are going to have the Flexcard sending through an action or launching through an action the OmniScript. Now, when it launches, the OmniScript is going to send a parameter, and this parameter is going to arrive to the OmniScript as a context ID. So I'm going to say, okay, account ID equals context ID. I might do it in several ways. We've already seen the ways. You can send it as a send JSON path and send JSON node, or you can send it as an extra payload. But in any case, you need to send it to, in that case, an integration procedure, right? Of course, in the preview, similar to the test value in a Flexcard, you have a context ID, and you need to copy and paste a real account ID or a record ID for the object if the OmniScript is in context, is executed in context, right? And click on this button if you want to restart the test, right? Reset your JSON DOM and start from scratch your testing. Then your data source is going to have account ID. And again, this account ID should match with the name that you have provided in this extra payload. Now, most of the mistakes that are done, at least by students in during our classes, are done with passing parameters from one element to the other. So that's why this diagram and the previous diagram are extremely helpful to understand why things are the way they are, right? Again, this filter value, it has the same name as the previous one, but it's just by convention because it doesn't have to, right? What it needs to be equal is to the filter in the Data Raptor extract, right? And with that, and of course, all the mappings, the output maps, okay, you will get the extraction of all the fields. Yeah. Now, the Data Raptor save is slightly different. Here you have a step account, and you have the website, you have the phone, you have the name, but there is something missing. The slide is not so large, so you must send the account ID as an extra payload or as you know, some other way. Now, once you get this ID, right, then you can define that this is a extra pay. Is an Upsert key, yeah, and required for Upsert, and then you can update or you know, create this this account. Okay, good. So let's try to do this now in a demo. Let's try to show some of those things. I don't know how much time do we have left, but let's try to do as much as we can. So I'm going to start by a sample get master account details where we are going to see, you see, one step is extracting the account. Second step is extracting the contacts where the field account ID of the contact is equal to account ID. So this is extracting the list of contacts belonging to that account, right? But as you see, there is a third extraction step. And the third extraction step is extracting the primary contact. So it's going to extract the contact which ID is equal to account colon velocity INS primary contact ID. In other words, the primary contact. Okay. Now, if I go to output now, The equivalent to this third extract is this last one over here. Pre-contact name, okay? And then account and account primary contact name. Now, this is equivalent to the one that I have created by, for demo purposes and to avoid losing time typing. I've already entered this relationship query. This relationship query gives exactly the same result, the primary contact name, as the one below. But if the difference is that if you use this one, right, you don't need in the extraction this third step. This third step could be deleted. Yeah, so I can delete that. Yes, delete. Another thing, remove. Oh, this has been idle for too long, so I need to refresh probably the page. Something that is really important is the data raptors do not have version, do not have active or inactive states. So they are, if you update them, if I delete that, there's no way to come back, right? So be careful with that. Be careful with making modifications on the data raptors, because they are going to affect instantly. That's probably one of the reasons for having an integration procedure and then a single data raptor inside it. Okay, because for maintenance purposes, for modifications or whatever, it's probably easier, okay, to make a version of the integration procedure, make the change, test it, and only once it has been thoroughly tested, then you activate the new version, and that replaces the old version. Yeah. So now I can go to the output, yeah, and I can delete my last mapping because now it doesn't make sense. And now I have my relationship query. Okay. Also in here, you see the multi-node. You see an account node and you see a contact node. And you see that the current output JSON is account. Under account, you have those fields, and under contact, you have those fields. Beforehand, before doing the query, the system doesn't know if this is going to be an array or not. But once it retrieves a list of names, it will convert it and it will use the format of an array, okay, of a square bracket. Good. So that was the first thing that I wanted to show you. Second thing is a transform data raptor. And the transform data raptor has not extract or object tabs. It only has formulas and then transformations. Now, in the transformations, you do see the input and the output. And you see again that current. So it's creating a current node and it's creating a forecast node, right? Now, for simplicity of training, we have created another two nodes, current icon and forecast icon, but those could perfectly have gone inside, okay, the other two nodes. And something that I want to highlight in this transformation is if I click on the formulas, you see the concatenation formulas, right? There are 4 concatenation formulas, one for the city and state, one for the max and mean temperature, and 2 for the forecast and current node. Notice that if you have an array, there is a nomenclature for indicating which item of the array you want to look for or you want to take. And it is the root node, pipe, the number of item, colon, and you continue with the subnodes. And this number starts by 1. It doesn't start by 0, right? So the first item is number 1, it's not number 0. But what I wanted to tell you is, look at this name, forecast, the formula result path, the forecast icon, current city name, and current weather icon. All of those are input JSON paths. So the result of the formula is not going to be automatically available in the output unless you do a mapping. So you see this current weather icon, this is the result of a formula. This forecast icon is the result of a formula. So if you don't put forecast icon relates to an output JSON path forecast icon, the result of the formula will not be available at the egress or at the response of this data raptor. Okay, good. And the next one was a sample. Create primary contact. So this is the link mapping that I was talking about. With this contact, you are creating a new contact, right? Now, in the account step, you are going to assign to a value, to a field called velocity INS primary contact ID, the record ID of the previous contact that you have created, right? So this is called a link mapping. Yeah. And when I go to my fields, I will find two tabs. I recommend that you do your mappings when you have several steps in those tabs and not in the old tab. That complicates a little bit the fact of adding mappings, right? So go to the contact tab and you have the account ID, create email, create first name, and create last name. This is coming from the JSON blob from the OmniScript execution, right? And then this is going to be mapped to those fields, account ID, email, first name, and last name from the contact record, right? So that's easy peasy. Now, the second one, account, this is going to be account ID, and this is required for Upsert. The second one is empty. And the reason why this is empty is because this is a link mapping. So the record ID of the contact that we have created in the previous step will automatically be added to the primary contact field of the account, right? Something that is just checked in the previous one, something is wrong here. We should click on the Upsert key and require for Upsert. Here is going to be the Upsert key only, but the last name is going to be Upsert key and require for Upsert, because we must have at least a last name before creating a new contact record, right? So this is required for Upsert, and it's also Upsert key because I don't want to have duplicates if I have brothers. So last name and first name, I'm going to do Upsert key for both. Yeah, but the only one required for Upsert is going to be the create last name. And you see, because I have done those changes, I don't need to save, I don't need to activate, I don't need to version, I can't do anything of that in a data raptor. And the last thing that I wanted to show you is the integration procedure for getting the forecast weather. So as I said, as I showed you in the slides, this has a data raptor extract, and this data raptor sending the account ID is going to retrieve the postal code. With this postal code and the API key from these set values, this is a static variable, okay, that I'm going to use in my HTTP action. If you take a look at this HTTP action, right, this HTTP action has this key equals percentage SV weather colon API key. So this SV weather is the other node, the set values name, and then the API key is the name of the variable inside these set values, right? And I'm also sending the postal code. So you see, postal code equals percentage data raptor get account info, which is the name of the data raptor extract action, and then the account postal code. This is the name of the variable, because when you do an action inside an integration procedure, the response of that action is going to be located in a node, in a JSON node with the same name of as the action, right? Good. So I'm going to execute an HTTP action for the current weather, for the forecast weather, and the data raptor transform that we have seen in the earlier tab is going to convert only a few of those 200 fields or more, okay, into a very well-known and simplified structure. And this structure will be the one sent by the response action. So this response action has send JSON path, the name of the data raptor transform action, right? Now, think something to keep in mind, the properties send JSON path in the response action doesn't work similar to an integration procedure or a data raptor. The response action must have something here in order to retrieve or send something back. If you leave this blank, the response action will not send anything to the caller or to the person who is executing this integration procedure or the entity. Yeah, the Flexcard in case the integration procedure is a data source, or the Omniscript in case the integration procedure is an action. Okay. Last thing, and I promise this is the last thing, is just to do a preview. So I need to set up the parameters. I can do it like that, okay, with a key value pairs, or I can do it by doing a, I don't think I need the record postal code. Let me see. I'm going to delete that and I'm going to execute. Yeah, effectively that was not needed because it's going to be calculated by a data raptor inside. So the result, the total result that this integration procedure will send back to the Omniscript, okay, will be two nodes. Oh, well, forecast node, current node, and then two additionals, the forecast icon and current icon. This will be displayed, okay, one of them at least, in the Omniscript. This is also used in the Flexcard, right? There is a weather Flexcard and there is a forecast weather. I can show you here. This is a Flexcard with the weather. You see, heavy snow, temperature. And if I click here, get 5 days forecast, this is a flyout with, in that case, this is dummy data, okay, because I haven't replaced by this integration procedure yet, but it's showing data for 5 following days. Okay, this is a flyout. But coming back to my test, imagine that I didn't get what I was expecting, right? Imagine that some of this is missing, or I don't have the structure that I like, or whatever. I click here on the response, debug response full, and I click on execution sequence. Those are the actions in the order they have been executed. So data raptor get account info, SB weather, HTTP get for the current and the forecast, data raptor transform, and response action. Now, if something is missing here, maybe it is because there is a conditional executional formula that did not meet to true, was not evaluated to true, okay? Or maybe you didn't activate an action, or maybe, you know, you did something wrong. So that's the first thing. Now, if I want to see every single input and output, look at this, data raptor get account info. I click on the debug. I said the debug was the input, and I'm sending as input the account ID. What am I expecting? I am expecting the postal code. Let's see what it gives me. I click on the one without the word debug, and as expected, the first field that I get is the postal code. I also get a lot of other things, but this is there, you know, without need. The only thing I'm interested on is the postal code. Yeah, I could have done a SQL query or something different, right? Good. Next action is an HTTP action. Sorry, SB weather, but this is a set value. So the set value really is just setting the API key. This doesn't have a lot of secret, right? The next one is an HTTP action. And the input of this HTTP action is just an endpoint, a URL query. What about the output? Let's take a look. Wow, the output is quite big, right? And if I go for the output of the forecast, it's even bigger because it's including a couple of items in the array. Now, do I want to give all this data unformatted, right, to my data source, to my Flexcard, or to my Omniscript? No. And that's why I use a data raptor, data raptor transform. And the result of my data raptor transform is just this forecast node with 2 nodes or subnodes, and then this current with 3 fields, okay? Temperature, city state, and condition, right? So that's it. Only I want to show you in the properties the way I send data to this HTTP action. Sorry, yeah, two things. In the response JSON path, the API, the external API, is including several nodes. And all the information I am interested in is included in a node called data. How can I trim? How can I filter by this node? I use the response JSON path and I put here data. And that eliminates all the other nodes that are not data. Yeah, and because I am in an integration procedure, it will also eliminate data from the root, and it will give me the content of this node only. That's one thing. The second thing I wanted to highlight that is different from what we have seen so far is in the data raptor transform, I am not going to send all the JSON blob of this integration procedure. What I'm going to see is to check is send only additional input, and I'm going to send one node called current, and inside this node current, I'm going to send the response of the HTTP get current weather. So I put percentage HTTP get current weather. And by doing that, I am sending only the response of that. And in another node called forecast, the response of that. Okay. So with that, I hope that it hasn't been too hard. Let me see if I can read some of the questions. How are we going regarding timing, Amit?
We can take another 5 minutes and we should be good.
Okay, excellent. So I'm going to read some of the questions from the top. How can we pass data from an OmniScript to a customer Lightning Web Component and vice versa? Well, the OmniScript can be exported, okay, to as files to be executed anywhere else. And there is something called Omni out, okay, that allows you to run OmniScripts with relatively good performance outside of the Salesforce environment. But it's something that is not, easy to do. Normally, if you have a Lightning Web Component that you want to interact with an OmniScript, the ideal thing to do is there is a component in the OmniScript called custom Lightning Web Component. So from this custom Lightning Web Component, you call your Lightning Web Component and it will be executed. Okay. Send equals incoming data. How is different from velocity? Is this different from velocity OmniStudio? I think all of that was in context of some of the questions. How to access data of first step in a third? Okay, that's a good question. In a step, okay, when you move from a step to step, basically the JSON DOM is not initialized, is not resetted. So you maintain, okay, all the data that has been executed, and you can still use it. So regardless if you are in a step or in another step, you will always have access by the entire JSON path, okay, to all the data that was collected in a previous step. Okay. All data stored in full JSON file generated, as I understood. Yes, the data is normally stored in JSON format, yeah, and it's a RAM called JSON DOM, and yeah, you can see it, you can check it, and it's live. It's a live storage. Yeah, if you want to store it, at the end of the OmniScript before closing it, you need to save it. You need to do a data raptor, an integration procedure save with either data raptor or an API, okay, an HTTP action inside. API integration doable by MuleSoft. So how it is more useful? Oof, I cannot answer this question because I'm not an expert on MuleSoft. I know they are investigating ways of increasing, the interaction of, and there are a lot of projects where they are working together, Velocity and MuleSoft, but I'm not an expert there. Sorry. Always wonder what related objects field in load Raptor stands for. Normally, related objects are when you want to save something, in that case, in the context of load data Raptor, when you want to save something in a related object instead of in the object itself. Now, it is true that in an extract, Data Raptor, I see this relationship query and it makes a lot of sense. In a low Data Raptor, I've never tested. So I will need to, to test it to see how it works. Then we have the questions of velocity INS and CMT. They are standard. They are not for demo purposes, and they are part of the data schema that Velocity is adding when you download the proper industry. And remember, there are 3 branches. One is insurance, one is CMT, and CMT insurance is for health and for insurance, okay? Property and casualty insurance. CMT is for 3 of them, for communications, for media, and for entertainment. Sorry, media and entertainment is the same, and for utilities, okay? So power and electricity and those type of things. And the last one is public sector, so PS. Could you please share this document with us? I've sent a copy of the slides to Amit. So I guess that maybe, Amit, you are going to post that somewhere, or give the people, a copy or access to it, or whatever, maybe in a PDF or in the format that you decide. Just please share the document. Here is the recording of the session. Thank you, Amit. Is the Flexcard and Velocity card both the same or different? That's a very good question. Flexcard is Lightning Web Component, okay? Velocity card is by default Angular, but in the Velocity card designer, you can still check a switch, okay, to make it Lightning Web Component. However, the capabilities, the styling, and a lot of features that have been added to Lightning Web Components are only available for Flexcards. So I would tell you or recommend you to work all the time with Flexcard designer, unless you are modifying a card that was built, okay, with Angular. And if a card has been built with Angular, you have no choice but to go with the Velocity card designer. Okay, I hope that is clear. What is the category of the console interaction card? I don't know what are you referring to, but I can tell you that a lot of cards, for example, the ones for the CPQ, industry CPQ, are still built with Angular. So if you want to make modifications to those cards to customize the Velocity card, the V card, for example, you still need to go to the card. I know that they are putting a lot of efforts to migrate all of that to Lightning Web Components. So very soon, hopefully, cross my fingers, you could be able to modify everything with the Flexcard designer. Please subscribe for recording. If interaction procedure taking time, then how we can configure in an OmniScript